Welcome to WMNF 88.5 FM and WMNF.org. You're listening to the Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Kinane, and we do have a jam-packed show today. Later on in the show, we're going to hear from Tampa Mayor Jane Castor. And then later, State Senator Janet Cruz will join us for an update on what's going on in Tallahassee. But first up, we're going to look at the important topic of Alzheimer's disease. It affects so many of us. Maybe you're a caregiver or you have a loved one with Alzheimer's. According to the website of the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disorder that impacts memory, thinking, and language skills, and the ability to carry out the simplest tasks. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. More than 5.8 million Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's disease. Next month, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America is hosting an online conference for Floridians who want to learn more about the disease. So we'll let you know about that conference this hour, as well as find out more with our guest. Chris Schneider is Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. Welcome to WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Chris.
Morning, Sean. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. First, what is the Alzheimer's Foundation of America?
So the Alzheimer's Foundation of America is a national nonprofit organization. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. And we were actually founded by a family caregiver. His name is Bert Brodsky. His mother lived with Alzheimer's disease in the 1980s and the early part of the 90s. And at that time, he really felt like he was dealing with it alone. Aside from talking to his mother's physician, there was no place to turn to for guidance or counseling. There weren't support services. There weren't support groups. And he didn't want any other family to go through this journey alone. So he created AFA in 2002 to be a resource for families in their time of need. And that's what we've been doing for 20 years. And that's exactly why we're doing this conference on February 16th for Floridians.
And we'll be speaking more about that conference as we go along through the interview. But let's back it all the way up and just tell us, what is Alzheimer's disease and how can someone tell if their loved one might have it?
Alzheimer's is a progressive degenerative brain disorder. And one of the most important things to remember about Alzheimer's disease is that it is not a normal part of aging. So often we hear people say, oh, I must be getting old. I'm forgetting things. It must be Alzheimer's. It must be another dementia-related illness. There's a difference between basic, regular forgetfulness and Alzheimer's. And one of the ways that people can really be proactive about their brain health is by getting a memory screening. And that's something that the Alzheimer's Foundation of America offers. We're doing them all virtually right now through secure video conference technology. And if you go to our website, which is alzfdn.org, or you call our office at 866-232-8484, you can schedule a screening appointment. It's free. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It's done one-on-one. It's all confidential. And all it is a series of questions, and the screener will just test your brain health and test your memory and your thinking skills. At the end of the screening, you get a score. If you're above the baseline, terrific. Come back in a year. If you're below the baseline, the screener would suggest that you go see a physician for a comprehensive evaluation. Doesn't diagnose any particular condition, but it is an important first step in detecting a potential memory problem.
FDN? Did I know AZA FDN?
It's alzfdn.org.
Thank you. That's why you're here.
No problem.
Not winging it. So you can go there for to get it set up a memory screening, and you do virtual memory screenings every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Well, I read on your website that there are more than 580,000 people living in Florida with Alzheimer's disease, and that number is expected to increase in the next few years, and it's a growing national health crisis. How can you predict the number? Obviously it's a prediction, but how can you determine roughly the number of people that will have it in the next few years? How do you make that projection?
Well, the CDC has national numbers. So right now the CDC estimates there are about 6.2 million Americans living with Alzheimer's. By 2060, they expect that number to more than double to 14 million if a cure is not found. And then locally in Florida, as you mentioned, there's about 580,000 people now. That's projected to grow by about 33% by 2025 to probably about 720,000. And those numbers come from the Florida State Department of Health. And part of the reason is attributed to age, because age in and of itself is a risk factor for Alzheimer's. So as the population increases in age, the risk of Alzheimer's goes up. But again, that's why it's so important that people take steps to be proactive about their brain health through memory screening, but also making different lifestyle choices. You know, just as doctors will recommend things like exercise and diet, and that can play a role in reducing risk factors for things like cholesterol or heart attack or diabetes, it also has an impact on your brain health. So eating right, exercising, quitting smoking, reducing alcohol intake, those are all lifestyle choices that can benefit your brain health as well as other aspects of your health as well. But another important factor that you can do is stay socially active, learn new skills, learn a new language, learn an instrument, socialize as best you can. You know, I know we're living in a time of the pandemic where you can't do everything you used to be able to do beforehand, but find ways to maintain those connections, find ways to exercise your brain as you would exercise other parts of your body, because it all plays a role in protecting you.
You're listening to WMNF Tampa 88.5 FM. This is the Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Kinane. My guest is Chris Schneider, Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. They have a meeting in Florida coming up. It's a virtual meeting, a conference so that you can learn more about Alzheimer's. We're also talking about memory screenings and other things that you can do to protect your health. There are different stages for Alzheimer's disease. So can you talk us through the different stages and what the symptoms are?
Yeah, the early stage, there's about 3 stages. And again, this information is available on our website, alzfdn.org, or by calling our helpline, which is open 7 days a week and staffed entirely by licensed social workers. That number is 866-232-8484. You know, there's an early stage where there is memory loss, but then, you know, you are able to maintain a lot of functions that you normally would. And then as it progresses, you know, your memory gets worse, you start seeing different physical symptoms as well. The progression varies. It can go very quickly for some people, and other people, it could take 15 to 20 years. It really does vary person to person. But what's important is that no matter however the disease is going to affect you, you want to try to detect it early. And again, that goes back to memory screening, but also, like any condition, the earlier you detect it, the greater ability you have to be proactive. So you'll be able to have greater opportunity to enroll in something like a clinical trial. You'll be able to take advantage of medications that can help slow the progression of the symptoms earlier when they're more effective. You can start getting involved in different therapeutic programs. You can start making legal, financial, and health decisions about how you want things to go and how you want your assets handled and what decisions you want to make with your healthcare. It's important that you have a role in making those decisions, and the earlier you're able to do that, the better. So that's why, again, we encourage everybody, if you're experiencing symptoms or you know someone who's experiencing symptoms, I know it can be scary, but it's so important to know what the cause of these symptoms are so you can start taking steps to address it. And the other thing that I should mention about memory is not all memory loss is related to Alzheimer's. There are other conditions, things like a vitamin deficiency, a thyroid condition, stress, sleep apnea, depression. All of those can cause memory loss, but they're also all treatable, if not curable. But if you don't investigate and get checked out what the issues you are experiencing are, you're not going to know that. And that's why memory screening and being proactive is so important for everybody.
Our guest is Chris Schneider, Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, alzfdn.org. And you're listening to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Kinane on WMNF Tampa 88.5 FM. Chris, we've already talked through a couple of these 5 common falsehoods about Alzheimer's disease that your group put out during Alzheimer's Awareness Month in November. You warned people about these 5. A couple of them we've already gone through, that it's just part of getting older. That's a falsehood. That nothing can be done for Alzheimer's, another falsehood. And that all memory impairments are the result of Alzheimer's. You just put that one to rest a moment ago. Let's talk about another one, that is that Alzheimer's, this is another myth, I should say, that Alzheimer's disease only affects senior citizens. Why is that a myth?
It predominantly affects senior citizens, but there is something called young onset Alzheimer's, and that can affect people in their 50s, in their 40s, and in some very rare cases, even their 30s. And while it's about 10% of all Alzheimer's cases is early onset or young onset, I should say, it can affect the younger people as well. And that's why it's so critically important that people get screened, especially if they're experiencing problems. But even if you're not, get that memory screening because it gives you a baseline. And as you go year to year and you get these screenings, if you start seeing the scores sliding, well, then you know maybe there's something going on, and it allows you to take action sooner and get it checked out and get that more comprehensive evaluation sooner so you can start addressing it immediately.
Another one of the 5 falsehoods is that you cannot reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's. I think you've mentioned a couple of them so far, but it's worth going over again. What are some ways that you can reduce your risk of developing Alzheimer's?
Lifestyle choices. Again, it's things like good diet. So you want to try to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. You want to try to avoid high saturated fat foods, a lot of red meat. You want to quit smoking. You want to limit your alcohol intake. You want to stay socially and physically active. You want to try to keep your brain exercised by learning new skills and maintaining those social connections. And these steps for healthy aging are on our website, alzfdn.org. But it's important to know, I mean, there are certain age factors, certain risk factors you can't control. You can't control your age, you know what I mean? But these risk factors here are all lifestyle choices, and it's never too soon to start.
So going off of that, what do we know about the propensity to Alzheimer's? Is there a genetic risk? I assume that the opposite lifestyle choices that you were talking about might increase your likelihood of developing Alzheimer's. But I'm mostly interested in what we know about the genetics and heredity of Alzheimer's.
Genetics can play a role, but it's not the only factor. And that's what's important to remember. If, like any condition, you know what I mean? If you have high blood pressure that runs in your family, or you have high cholesterol that runs in your family, or certain types of cancers, things like that, it does increase your risk for it, but it is not a guarantee that you're going to get it. Someone who has had 4 relatives with Alzheimer's may not get it. Someone who has had none may get it. So it really, again, it's a risk factor, but it's not the determining factor. So it's important to try to control the things you can control, and that's lifestyle choices.
Our guest is Chris Schneider, Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. Their website is alzfdn.org. Their national toll-free helpline is 866-232-8484. It's staffed by licensed social workers. And there's also a way of texting them that we'll talk about in just a bit. But you mentioned earlier, Chris, that there's ways that you can participate in clinical trials, which to me indicates that there are people that are working on either treatments for, or cures for, or therapeutics for Alzheimer's. Can you talk a little bit about those right now, please?
Yeah, there's research studies that are ongoing. Scientists are working really, really hard to try to find a cure and a treatment for this disease. AFA has funded different research projects in New York, across the country, even as far away as Israel. But there are other clinical trials being run as well. The NIH keeps a database. If you want to try to find a clinical trial to participate in, you can find that on our website. We have a link to it, alzfdn.org. I think one of the really encouraging things about research over the last decade is the federal government has really stepped up and dramatically increased funding for research for Alzheimer's disease. So in 2012, they released what's called the National Plan to Address Alzheimer's Disease. And at that time, research funding from the federal government for Alzheimer's was a little under $500 million. And scientists had said that the minimum amount needed to find a cure or treatment by 2025, which is the plan's goal, is $2 billion a year. And they worked in a bipartisan manner, which is great, both with a Democratic president, a Republican president, Democrat Congress, Republican Congress, and have grown research funding significantly, going from about $500 million a year in 2012 to now over $3 billion in the current fiscal year. It's tremendous progress, and it's an investment in hope, but it's not enough. And we need them to keep building on that progress until we cross the finish line and find the cure that everybody is praying for.
Speaking of research, your foundation recently funded $1 million grant to the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research to expand research into developing new treatments aimed at addressing some of the most problematic behaviors of dementia. Your group lists those as hallucinations, delusions, and aggression. So what do you hope will come out of that research?
We hope that there's new medication that comes out of it. They've been exploring some of the potential causes of these symptoms. And the reason they're so dangerous is not only just to the individual themselves, but also to the caregiver. Because if somebody is becoming aggressive or they're hallucinating and thinking that the caregiver is potentially going to cause them harm, it may put the caregiver in danger too. So it's an important thing that we need to address. It's a quality of life issue. It's a safety issue. And it's one of the main reasons actually that the caregiver will make the decision that, hey, we need to move this person into a professional setting where they're trained to handle these kind of things. So hopefully by finding a treatment for these symptoms and identifying the cause of why, certain areas of the brain are more prone to this than others, that we'll be able to alleviate and hopefully prevent the symptoms and keep that person in a home setting much longer rather than having to move them into a professional setting.
Our guest is Chris Schneider, Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America. You're listening to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Kinane. You're listening to WMNF Tampa, 88.5 FM. You might also be listening on WMNF.org, or you might be listening on the WMNF smartphone app. And we're recording this video. I'm going to put it up on our website, WMNF.org, later today, so you can watch if you missed any of this, or if you'd like to share it with anyone in your family or any of your loved ones. And the national toll-free helpline for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America is 866-232-8484. If you'd like to go to their website, it's alzfdn.org. You can also reach one of their licensed social workers by a text message. And here's the number for the text: 646-586-5283. So I'd like to ask you, Chris, about advice that you can give families about healthy aging, long-term care planning, legal planning, and caregiving, because a lot of it is it's a family issue. Alzheimer's disease, it's something that the whole family kind of has to get involved in caregiving for.